Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro officially launched on Friday a new management system called 1 for 10 of Good Governance, which, according to the dignitary, intends to empower the Venezuelan people more. Russia's defense ministry announced on Saturday that its forces destroyed a large Western arms shipment in northwestern Ukraine using long-range missiles. Australia's opposition leader Anthony Albanese claimed a victory on Saturday in national elections. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Diego Martin from the teleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro officially launched on Friday the new management system called 1 for 10 of Good Governance. The new strategy has been already applied successfully as a political tactic and will now be implemented to bring the management of all levels of government closer to the people's power, according to the executive's speech. The president explained that it is a civil-military police operation in coordination with local and regional authorities as well as the powers that make up the national state. Maduro said the system is a new level of technological and human connection to attend to the real problems of the people, to prioritize their concerns, and provide them with a real-time response, real-time solutions to the problems of public service and of the communities.
In the name of a collective, the high political military command of the revolution, I officially present a plan for a new government, the 1 for 10 of the new government, of the good government. And I ask you to take note. Let us take it very seriously. Let us subordinate ourselves to the 1 for 10 of the good government, civilians and military. Let us subordinate ourselves to the new commands, to the new schemes, and to the new policies. 4 years after the great victory of May the 20th, the time has come for a good government, for a new government, for a better way of exercising popular and political power.
In this context, the Venezuelan president called on all government agencies to incorporate the new government system.
That we deploy from today, in the coming hours, in the coming days, to explain, to inform, to saturate the whole Venezuelan society with truthful information so that we can all join this plan of a new government, of a new way of governing, of the attention and solution of the problems of the people, who in the end are the center of our life, of our existence.
The Venezuelan government completed on Saturday a new repatriation flight of migrants from Peru within the framework of the social program. Returned to the homeland, 264 Venezuelans boarded an aircraft of the national airline Conviasa at the Jorge Chávez International Airport in Lima to return to their country on the third flight of the government program from Peru so far this year. Their return to the homeland program, named after a poem by the famous Venezuelan writer Juan Antonio Pérez Bonalde, has returned home more than 29,000 Venezuelan migrants from 21 countries. The Constitutional Court of Ecuador rejected President Guillermo Lazo's total veto on the reforms to the organic law and intercultural education approved by the Congress. The court dismissed the objection of the executive included in the presidential veto, by which the President of the Republic had nullified the legal provisions granting retirement benefits as well as a salary increase of up to 75% to teachers. The magistrates were able to verify that the Presidency of the Republic had not provided solid arguments on the unconstitutionality of the norm and found that prior to its approval and in a reasonably acceptable manner, the Congress conducted a relevant financial feasibility analysis on its impact on public finances. A total of 25 American countries questioned the upcoming Summit of the Americas after the exclusion of several nations by the United States. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, as well as his peers from Bolivia, Luis Arce Catacora, and Guatemala, Alejandro Yamatei, rejected the exclusion of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua from the meeting by the United States, stating that they will not attend if all countries of the region are not included. Leaders of the 15-nation Caribbean community said that they did not agree with the decision of U.S. President Joe Biden, but have not dismissed their participation in the meeting. Meanwhile, the Mexican dignitary affirmed that he will not give up his efforts to reach an agreement that will allow all countries to attend. In Colombia, Ingrid Betancourt withdrew from the electoral race as a presidential candidate while expressing her support to the independent candidate Rodolfo Hernández for May 29th elections. The journalist who was kidnapped 20 years ago while campaigning for the presidency of the South American country and who was held captive for more than 6 years by the rebel group known as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia expressed her decision during a press conference in Barranquilla, in the northern region of the country, together with Hernández. Betancourt ran on the ballot of her own organization, the Environmentalist Party, focusing strongly on anti-corruption. However, her candidacy never really took off, and according to polls, less than 1% of Colombians intended to vote for her. In Colombia, the third most displaced country on the planet, as revealed by the Observatory on Internal Displacement and the Norwegian Refugee Center, 5.2 million Colombians were forced to leave their homes due to violence. Our correspondent Viviana Bello brings us the details.
Violence against farmers, indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities, especially against human rights defenders as well as former FARC fighters, places Colombia in third place in the world with the most internally displaced persons.
Around 89% of the victims have suffered from this situation. The second thing is that the departments of the Pacific Coast, as well as the border with Ecuador and Venezuela, are the areas most affected by forced displacement. And the third thing is that the humanitarian situation in Choco calls my attention. In approximately 10 years, 175,000 people were displaced in 100% of the municipalities, and especially in the regions of Baudó, San Juan, and Atrato.
The slow implementation of the peace agreement has allowed the civilian population to remain at the disposal of paramilitary structures, FARC residual groups, and agents of the security forces, who are also accused of serious human rights violations.
This situation, unfortunately, has some origins and some consequences for the failure of the national government to the situation and the implementation of the peace agreements, which allowed to change the living conditions, the forms of production, and others.
The border zone, the Pacific and the south of the country are the regions of Colombia where most displacement situations persist.
In January, for example, Arauca and north of Santander registered displacements due to disputes between armed actors. Also displacements of people coming from Venezuela, where Colombian groups have entered to break into their territories. The invasions and displacements not only affect the communities' departure from their territory or of people when they are displaced in particular, but also affect their way of life.
The majority of displaced persons are children. Colombia is second only to Syria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Viviana Bello, teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. Deaths and injuries from migrant falls at the border fence between the U.S. state of California and Mexico are more frequent since parts of the structure were enhanced under the Trump administration. According to a study by the University of California, San Diego Hospital, the number of patients with horrific fractures, punctured lungs, and traumatic miscarriages has increased. Upon reaching the border wall, migrants desperate to reach their goal of reaching U.S. soil decide to jump over it. In 2019, the wall that crosses part of the U.S.-Mexico border was erected at several points of the division line, fulfilling a campaign promise of then-President Donald Trump. Since that date, the number of injured crossers has reached 375, and 16 people have lost their lives after falling off the wall.
This is a ladder made out of rebar that oftentimes this type of ladder is used to scale the border wall. Flat panels that are on top of the border wall, it's a feature that's supposed to retain the heat of the sun, and so if someone is climbing it, it makes it that much more difficult for them to hold on.
Russia's defense ministry announced on Saturday that its forces destroyed a large Western arms shipment in northwestern Ukraine using long-range missiles. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashenkov informed that high-precision, long-range, sea-launched caliber missiles destroyed a large batch of weapons and military equipment sent by the United States and the European Union near the Malin Railroad Station in the Zhytomyr region. The officer said that 77 command centers, along with military equipment and troops, were destroyed and neutralized in 602 areas, including a training base of the Ukrainian Army Special Operations Forces. Konashenkov also reported that Moscow's troops shot down one Su-25 plane of the Ukrainian Air Force and 14 drones. In the midst of the conflict in Ukraine, NATO countries are considering the possibility of sending weapons and military assistance to Moldova. The statement was made by the United Kingdom's Foreign Affairs Minister Liz Truss. She argued that the measure would help Moldavia defend itself from an alleged potential Russian invasion. The British official said that NATO member countries are pondering the thought heavily. If approved, NATO countries would be supplying Moldova with modern weapons and instructors to teach Moldovan soldiers on how to use them. According to the Moldovan constitution, the country maintains neutrality, although since 1994 it has been cooperating with NATO on the grounds of an individual partnership action plan. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday proposed the creation of a state information protection system during a meeting of the Russian Security Council. Putin described this issue as a comprehensive and extremely relevant for everyone since the head of state explained it concerns the sovereignty, public stability, and security of Russia. In his speech, the president announced that cyber attacks against Russia are well coordinated and carried out from different countries with the participation of state structures. In this regard, Putin stressed that the number of cyber attacks has increased several times over and that, according to experts, hackers are unable to do so without broader assistance. The president claimed that there is a large-scale war against Russia in cyberspace and that the number of cyber attacks against it has increased in recent years, especially since the conflict with Ukraine.
The number of cyber attacks, including complex ones, has increased many times over. As specialists and experts note, lone hackers, of course, cannot do this. Attacks are delivered from different states, and at the same time, they are clearly coordinated. Purposeful attempts are being made to disable the internet resources of Russia's critical information infrastructure.
The World Health Organization confirmed on Saturday 80 cases of monkeypox in at least 11 countries. According to the international organization, another 50 cases are still being investigated. The entity indicated that they are working with affected territories to monitor the disease and support people who may be affected. The countries that reported cases in the last week are Germany, Spain, Italy, France, Belgium, Sweden, United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia, and Portugal, and the latter being the most affected with a total of 23 infected cases after reporting 9 cases in the last 24 hours. The first case of monkeypox on the continent was reported in the United Kingdom on May 7th. On Saturday, North Korean authorities reported almost 220,000 people with fever and that there's been a new death as a consequence of the latest COVID-19 outbreak reportedly started 9 days ago. According to the North Korean Central News Agency, 219,000 North Koreans with fever have been identified in the last 24 hours, which increases the number of infected people to 2.46 million. In this context, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un held a meeting with the Politburo of the ruling Workers' Party to discuss strategies in the war against the epidemic and asked to optimize the prevention policy. Strict confinement is being maintained throughout the country, and the army has deployed its doctors to all pharmacies in Pyongyang to ensure a 24-hour supply of medicines. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back to From the South. Australia's opposition leader Anthony Albanese claimed victory Saturday in national elections. Voters have delivered a sharp disapproval to the centre-right government of Prime Minister Scott Morrison, ending 9 years of Conservative rule in favour of the centre-left opposition that promised stronger action on climate change. Australian Labor Party leader Anthony Albanese appeared certain to form a minority government, though it was unclear as counting continued if the party would have enough seats for a majority. The results gave at least 74% of seats to the Labour Party against 55% that went to the Conservative coalition of current former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who had been in office since 2013. After the figures were released, Morrison contacted Albanese to acknowledge his victory and congratulate him after a strong race.
Tonight, the Australian people have voted for change. I am humbled by this victory, and I'm honoured to be given the opportunity to serve as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia.
Cameroon celebrated on Friday the 50th anniversary of its Unity Day. The last parade was held in 2019, after which, in a rare public appearance, 89-year-old head of state Paul Biya presided over this year's civil and military parade. President Paul Biya, rumored to be in a bad shape after 40 years of absolute power in Cameroon, attended the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the end of federalism, which distinguished the French-speaking and English-speaking parts of the country. Officers and schoolgoers marched holding flags and banners which read, "Let us all support a strong Cameroon committed to its national unity." Half a century ago, British Southern Cameroon and French Cameroon reunified to form the United Republic of Cameroon, and this year's celebrations were under the theme Defense and Security Forces at the Service of the People for the Preservation of Social Peace and National Cohesion. On Friday, Egypt's Prime Minister launched a new national strategy for tackling climate change. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouly said that Egypt was one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change at the introduction of the National Climate Change Strategy 2050. Madbouly emphasized the importance of addressing climate change and described it as a threat to national security. Egypt will host the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh in November. The Minister of Environment announced that costs for the NCCS 2050 plan is estimated to be about $211 billion for mitigation programs and $133 billion for adaptation programs. In northern Michigan, United States, a tornado hit and killed at least one person and injured about 40. On Friday, a rare tornado hit the small community of Gaylord, Michigan, a town of 4,200 people. The weather phenomenon caused considerable damage, overturning vehicles, tearing roofs off buildings, knocking down trees, and blowing down power lines. Several homes and businesses were affected as well. Michigan police confirmed the death of at least one person and said in a tweet that more than 40 people resulted injured and are receiving treatment at area hospitals. Under the slogan Earth, Life, Legacy from Scarcity to Prosperity, the COP15, which opened on May 9th in Abidjan, aimed to determine actions to fulfill the commitment to restore 1 billion hectares of damaged land by 2030. The conference also called for enhancing readiness, response, and resilience against drought, protecting land use against the impacts of climate change, addressing the growing risks of catastrophes, and dealing with desertification and land degradation. The event was held following the recent release of a United Nations report that states that around 40% of the Earth's land surface is degraded by overexploitation of soils and human action, a situation that directly affects half of humanity.
Beyond the technical terms and discussions, it is really about life. It's about our well-being. Knowing that 40% of the planet's land surface is already damaged by human activity, I think it calls for action. So this COP is also a call to action on two major issues, land restoration and drought.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I am Diego Martin. Thank you for watching.